5. We cleaned up the dishes on the table, then washed off the dust and sweat of the day in the suite's bath. Not all at once, of course. I went first, followed by Asana and Argo. Although I finished my bath in just 3 minutes, the girls took over 30, which was long enough for me to gain a point in my meditation skill while waiting. I'd gained the meditation skill from Bohrum, the old man with the hamburger steak in Castle Galley on the 6th floor, but it was still largely a mystery to me. The effect of meditation itself was simple. If you maintained a kind of Zen meditation pose for a certain period of time, you gained an HP regeneration buff and a mild resistance to all negative status ailments. It was a very useful thing, but when you started at 0 proficiency, it took 60 seconds of meditation to go into effect. That wasn't viable in battle. On the other hand, I couldn't have counteracted the paralyzing throwing darts of the fallen elves who attacked Castle Galley without the meditation effect. It was going to be a crucial skill when I knew I was going up against them again, or certain PKers who used similar weapons. That was all fine and good. The problem was the awakening mod on the meditation skill. Skill mods were extra effects you could earn at certain milestones for each skill, and normally they were very easy to understand. For weapon skills, you had things like sword skill cooldown reduction and critical rate increase. For the search skill, you got effects like increased simultaneous tracking and search distance increased. In most cases, you didn't even need a description. But the name Awakening didn't tell you anything. Even the description only said, focuses concentration to the extreme and draws out hidden strength. The thought of using up all the valuable skill slots just for the sake of this mystery mod gave me a pause. But Awakening was a mod that was only available at Meditation Skill Proficiency 500, so if I took Meditation out of its slot now, I would probably never see it again. I had some ideas about what Awakening might do, however. At the very end of the fight against the Irrational Cube, the boss of the 6th floor, a PKer named Buxom, made his move. He snuck up behind the nearly dead boss, pulled out the golden cube that had break and bind powers, then use them to freeze every last player in the chamber aside from himself. When I saw Buxom about to kill Maya's mother, Theano, I screamed at myself to move with all the willpower I had, feeling the neurons burning in my brain. That was when I saw, next to the paralysis icon, a new buff icon that looked similar to meditation. It was a person in a Zen pose with a ring of golden light in the background. The moment that icon appeared, my freezing debuff was gone, and I charged at Buxom. I sliced through his longsword and arm with a simple swing, not even a sword skill. Unfortunately, he managed to escape, but if I hadn't broken through the debuff, not only would Maya and Theano be dead, but probably Asana and I would be too. Was that the effect the Awakening mod had? Had I focused to the extreme and drawn out hidden strength to break the curse of the Golden Cube? But Aincrad was just a VR world generated by nerve gear. There were no real miracles or magic spells in this world. So how would they measure something immeasurable like concentration? Was Akihito Kayaba's nerve gear somehow capable of not only receiving the brain's movement commands to manipulate the avatar, but reading a person's thoughts as well? And speaking of mysteries, Buxom's identity was one too. He wore a Saleh helmet that covered everything from his nose on upward, so I couldn't make out his facial features. But if he'd been undercover in the DKB, the rest of his guild must have seen his face. The DKB and the ALS had emergency meetings in the boss chamber about him after the fight, but I still hadn't heard what came of that discussion. I was thinking I'd have to drop Shivata a line about that as the girls emerged from the other room. Asana wore a puffy-sleeved mini one-piece with leggings that went down past the knee, while Argo had a very odd look by her standards, with a simple sleeveless shirt and shorts. I couldn't help but stare. It put the biggest smirk I'd ever seen on Argo's face. "What's up, key boy? Entranced?" "I'm not entranced by anything," I shot back, sounding like a fourth grader. Then I added, "I was just thinking it must be nice to wear." "Then why don't you change into something more summery?" Asuna pointed out immediately. I looked at my outfit. I'd taken off the coat and breastplate, so I was only wearing a black long-sleeve shirt and black pants now. It was anything but summery. However, the skin-tight shirt's material was thin, and trousers of shadow thread were a rare drop. And very breathable, considering how good their defense was. But the most important thing of all was, if I take these off, I'll be in my underwear. Asuna's eyebrows shot upward. "Nobody asked you to strip. I said, why don't you change?" But I don't have any other clothes to wear." Asuna and Argo exchanged a knowing look and then shared a heavy sigh. I could practically hear them thinking, "Boys." Fortunately, they didn't bug me about the clothes after that. Instead, they went down to the first floor and headed outside. It was after 8 o'clock. That was when the night session of gameplay began, but we had no plans to leave the town tonight. I assumed I wouldn't need my sword, but just in case, I kept my backup short sword equipped on my left side, rather than gathering virtual dust in my inventory. The coastal street greeted us with a tropical scent. From there, we walked leisurely up one of the 3 staircase streets, the western staircase. It was only half as wide as the great stairs, but there were sketchy-looking item shops and pubs along the way, giving it a real RPG back alley vibe. I recalled that a number of quests started here, but we ignored them all as we climbed the worn steps. Eventually, a very large and brightly illuminated building came into view. Miranats split the night sky above its navy blue dome. 3-point flags of red and black snapped in the breeze. That was the Volupta Grand Casino, a place of joy and despair. I suddenly noticed that despite the cooling temperature, both of my palms were slick with sweat. I almost played along with the trope and muttered, "Am I actually afraid?" But I figured the girls would either not get the reference or think I was being stupid. From the western staircase, we headed into the plaza in front of the casino, where things looked dramatically different. It was a little bit smaller than the square at the center of the town with the fountain, but the tiles underfoot were arranged in detailed and complex mosaics, and the businesses lining the sides were very refined. The most stunning part of all, however, was the stateliness of the casino on the west end of the square. It was white walls were lit by torches, and the pillars were carved into statues that made it look like the home of a king. In fact, it truly was the castle of Volupta. Whoever owned the Grand Casino, I didn't know their name or face, was indeed the ruler of this town. Armed guards stood on either side of the open entrance, through which came the light sound of string music and lively chatter from dazzling interiors. All the NPCs walking inside were dressed in their best clothes. When Asuna noticed them, she leaned over and whispered, "Hey, this casino doesn't have a dress code, does it?" Dress code? At first, I thought she was talking about a code for a DLC downloadable content item, or something, since she'd used the English term. When I realized she was talking about clothing standards, I waved my hand and shook my head. No, not at all. I'm sure they'd stop you if you're wearing only underwear, but they don't care if you're in starter gear, or a tattered robe, or full plate armor. You think those slobs in the DKB and the ALS have formal wear? That's a good point, said Asuna, buying the explanation immediately. It was like a summoning spell. No sooner had I mentioned them than I heard a grating, familiar Kansai accent from the other side of the square. "All right, let's win the jackpot and take home that big-ass sword," others replied in his announcement with grunts like, "Yeah!" and "You bet!" We quickly backed away and hid under the eaves of one of the businesses so we could watch the east side of the square. Walking down the main street was a group of about 10 players, wearing dark green and iron black. We didn't need to see their spiky hair of the man leading them to recognize the ALS. Apparently, they had finished their guild feast and now senior membership were heading into the casino to enjoy their evening. Kabau's group stomped across the square with no sign that they were aware we were even there, and went through the casino entrance. They were probably planning on to bet big on the battle arena. That would be starting at 9. What big-ass sword, I wondered. I couldn't remember anything like that during the beta. Argo shrugged and whispered back, "Go and see for yourself." "Well, fine, let's go," I said, pulling off the wall, but Asuna pushed me back. Before I could protest, I heard approaching footsteps. Another group, about the same size, in dark blue and silver, took the exact same route as the ALS. In lead was Lind, the calligraphy club member. To his right was Shivata, the track and field runner, and to his left was Hafnir, the soccer player. It was the DKB, the other major guild. Their descriptions weren't actually true, just epithets I used. But I didn't have room to be so insulting, really. Other players kept calling me nicknames like Master Black, so it was about time I helped their nicknames catch on among the group too. In the meantime, Lynn's group crossed the square and disappeared into the casino too. There were no questions. They were heading for the night installment of the battle arena, just like Kabaz's gang. How many chips did they win at the arena during the day? I muttered to myself, but I didn't expect Argo to actually answer me. I checked on that. Apparently, they both got over 1,000. 1,000! I had to clamp my mouth shut to keep from screaming. Instead, my throat worked itself out, and I said quietly, "In that case, they should quit while they're ahead. Wasn't the grand prize at the casino worth 1,000 chips anyway?" "Plus, they could get a beach pass," said Asuna, with no small amount of envy. Argo looked at both of us and smirked. "Sorry, but your info's old. If you want VIP status in the beach pass that comes with it, you gotta win 30,000 chips." 30? Asuna gasped. Then Argo looked at me and dropped another bombshell. "And the highest value prize got updated too. You need 100,000 chips for that one." 100? I gasped. In the beta, I gambled for the chance to win 1,000 chips and ruined myself. To win 100 times that much, with each chip converting to 100 coal, would require winnings equal to 10 million coal. 10 million? That's 10 mega coal. Are they really going to bring out mega items on the 7th floor? And do Lind and Kiba think they're gonna turn 1,000 chips into 100,000? I murmured, feeling lightheaded. Argo just tossed up her hands. "I suppose so. Well, they turned 100 into 1,000 at a daytime coliseum. But even then, that's just a 10-fold profit. This would be 100-fold on that." 100-fold is just 10-fold times 10-fold, she said pointlessly. Asuna crossed her arms in front of her face, then swung them outward in a decisive gesture. "No way! 30,000 chips just for a chance to hang out on a beach for half a day? 3 million coal, that's insane! I mean, that's 6 million coal for the two of us, and 9 million if we include Argo. If we had to get that much money, we could just buy an entire house facing the sea." Again, technically a lake. "Whatever, shut up. My point is, no casino. Never mind. Let's go to the next town already." Asuna fumed and started to walk away, but I pinched her puffy cheek in a hurry. Wait a second. We don't have to bet, but we do have to fulfill Argo's request." "Oh." She came to a stop. Argo grinned at her. Don't you want to know how to get the snow tree bud, A-chan? She hummed longer than usual, then turned to Argo. What do you want us to do? Argo simply said, I'll explain inside, and started toward the casino, so we had to follow her bouncing curls. The entrance to the Volupta Grand Casino was a diagonal across of the tile mosaics. The huge marble facade was like a five-star hotel in the real world. Even the shining armor of the guards had been upgraded several levels since the beta. But Argo was not intimidated in the slightest. Her leather sandals clip-clopped through the doorway as soon as we passed through after her. We were met with a refreshing cool air, then pleasant string music and the smell of sweet flowers. It was blindingly bright inside the entrance hall, thanks to mainly the massive chandelier. I wondered how many candles and how much oil they used every single night, but there was no point to worrying about that in a virtual world. A statue of a bird-headed goddess stood in the center of the octagonal hall, just like the fountain in the square. Behind her was a set of 3 large doors that headed into the playroom. A staircase on the right wall led upstairs, and the stairs on the left wall descended. The way down was open, but a red rope and an NPC in black blocked the stairs going up. It seemed like the musical performance was floating down from there. What's up there? Asuna asked. Argo said, if it's the same as the beta, the second floor is the high roller room for VIPs, and the third floor is the luxury hotel. Even I don't know what's on the fourth. You, Keyboy? Nope, I said, shaking my head. Asuna shrugged lightly. Well, it doesn't matter, since we're not gambling anyway. Where are we picking up this quest you want us to help with? Not so fast, A-chan. Even if you're not playing, you can still enjoy the atmosphere, Argo said with a grin, and started off again. She made her way around the goddess statue and towards the 3 doors in the back. As soon as we passed through the open doorway, the refined string music was too quiet to hear, drowned out by an enthusiastic glamour. The playroom was about as big as a high school gym. There were countless tables packed with visitors enjoying games of chance and skill. They were arranged in 3-sided manner that was open toward us, with a roulette on the right side, dice on the left, and cards taking up the majority of the space straight ahead. This arrangement, at least, was the same as I remembered it being in the beta. In the middle of the room was the exchange counter, where you could pay coal to receive casino chips, and the prize counter where you could trade those chips for items. There were 2 more bars where you could order drinks and light food, making 4 counters in the shape of a square. I leaned over to speak to my temporary partner, who was standing in stunned silence. Hey, let's just go see what you can win. Don't you want to know what you can get for 100,000 chips? Asuna blinked several times and looked at me with renewed caution. Yes, but you'd better not announce you're going to start betting in hopes of winning it. Nope, not gonna. Come on, let's go, I said, pushing her toward the counters. Argo tagged along, smirking at us. I glanced at the sides of the room as we walked, and it seemed that most of the gamblers, in fact all of them, were NPCs. There wasn't a single green cursor in sight to indicate a player. If this were the main town of the floor, they would be flowing through the teleporter gate from below in hopes of winning a fortune. But there was a reasonable amount of danger in traveling from Lectio to Volupta. Only the guild involved with pushing out our progress forward would be able to get here on the first day. The thought made me realize that the DKB and the ALS weren't in here either. They must have gone straight down the stairs in the entrance hall. Then, it was currently 8:30. There was still plenty of time before the night arena. No, I told myself, cutting off the temptation. I took a right around the exchange counter, passing the bar alongside in order to see the prize counter in the back. A pillar of marble, nearly 3 meters across, with a splendid display case fixed to it, stood behind a woman in a black vest. there had to be 5 times as many different items as what they featured in the beta. On the bottom shelf, there were consumable items like potions, which could be won for a few chips. The shelf above it had useful looking tools. The one above that had colorful accessories and small pieces of equipment. And on the top shelf, shining brilliantly in the light of the chandelier, was a longsword. The wide blade was a silver as a mirror, with a gold embedded into the bevel line. The brim was golden too, while the grip was red leather and a massive jewel adorned the pommel. "Oh, that's certainly attention-grabbing," Asuna murmured, which I had to agree with. The real issue was its specs. If that sword cost 100,000 chips, then 10 million coal, I couldn't begin to imagine what sort of attack power it offered. I took 2 steps forward, the exchange counter, and rose onto my tiptoes to see the sword. But you had to tap it with your finger to see the properties window. There was no way I could do that when the sword was on display over twice my height off the ground. I had risen up and down off my heels several times when Argo finally noted, "Keyboy, you can just get a prize pamphlet at the counter." You could have told me that first," I grumbled, clearing my throat in embarrassment and taking 2 more steps to the counter. The NPC woman gave me a very pleasant and professional smile. I said, "Pamphlet, please," and she produced a rolled parchment for me, with a nary a nasty look at my casual clothing. "Here you are, sir." "Thanks," I said, hurrying off to the side to open it up. Asuna peered over my right arm. It was quite a hefty pamphlet, complete with a detailed color illustration. They didn't have printing technology in this world, which meant if you really wanted to go down this rabbit hole, that each illustration was painted by hand. But of course, all this was just the magic of the game's work. Below each illustration was the item name written in the English alphabet, but fortunately for me, the description text was in Japanese. I passed by the potions, tools, and accessories and went to the back of the pamphlet to check out the gold and silver jeweled sword. The illustration was adorned with the name Sword of Volupta. To the right of that, it said 100,000 VC. I remembered that VC was the abbreviation of the official name of the Grand Casino's chips, Volcoins. I believed Argo for the first time, of course, but actually seeing that number on a page made my head swim. I shook it to clear my mind and examined the text instead. It said, "The sword of the hero Valhari, founder of Volupta, and slayer of the water dragon, Zerigia. It heals the wielder, purifies all poisons, and strikes true with every swing." I muttered, just as Asuna's went, "It's hard to say what its properties are," she muttered. "It sounds very impressive, but unless we can see the actual readout of its specs," I pointed towards the counter. "Asuna, if I let you stand on my shoulders, would you try tapping that sword?" "Absolutely not!" She was just being a stick in the mud, though the moment we crossed the space behind the counter, those hardy men dressed in black would come for us. I returned to the text. Based on this, we don't know the actual attack power or the number of upgrade attempts it has, but if the additional effects are exactly as the text suggests, I can see why it would be worth 10 million coal. Equipping it automatically regenerates HP, nullifies damaging and paralyzing poisons, and turns every attack into a critical hit. Right? Saying it out loud really made clear what an absolutely broken item the Sword of Volupta was. It wasn't meant to exist here, on just the 7th floor. I looked back to the sword on the top shelf of the display case. The gaudy, eye-catching design wasn't my style, to be sure, but our circumstances, appearance was hardly the most important thing. If it increased the chances of survival for my partner and me, I'd use a sword 100 times uglier than that one. Or so I told myself, at least. For now, the sword was out of reach, both literally and figuratively. If I converted all my assets into chips, I'd have only 900. To turn them into 100,000, I'd have to bet everything double on roulette wheel and win 7 times in a row. The odds of that were... Asuna, what's 0.5 to the 7th power? Huh? Like 0.0078 hum-diddy-dum, right? Thanks. So that would be about 0.8%. I murmured. The fencer looked at me suspiciously for about 2 seconds. Then her brows shot upward. Oh, you were asking for the chances of winning 7 straight all-or-nothing bets? Yeah. Wow, you figured that out? Of course I did. And you know there's no way a 0.8% chance will work out. Look, you don't have to lose anything just thinking about it. But next you'll be saying, I'm just betting 100 call, she shot back. Stifled laughter met our bickering. I glanced over at the rat, whose painted whiskers were twitching. She cackled and giggled, writhing back and forth for at least 5 seconds before she finally looked up. I tell ya, I never get bored of watching you two. Please, you gotta stick together for as long as possible. Well, we don't have any plans to break it up, I admitted, stone-faced. As long as someone doesn't bankrupt us at the casino, Asuna added. We left the gaming room while I still had my willpower intact and returned to the entrance hall. It was 8:40 p.m. now. I tossed the pamphlet into my inventory so it would stop tempting me and leaned over to ask Argo. So, what did you want us to do? Ah, right. She snapped her fingers and went through her menu, blinding speed. A party request appeared, and Asuna and I accepted it. A third HP bar appeared in the upper left corner. Now we should be able to share this quest this way, she said, heading over to the descending staircase toward the first basement level. That's a bad direction to go, I thought. I couldn't argue with the client. The scarlet carpeted stairs took us along the octagonal walls 3/4 of the way around the first basement hall. There was another statue of the center of the room, but this was not of a bird-headed goddess, but a powerful lion-headed warrior standing atop another warrior with a lizard head. Beyond the statue was another set of 3 doors like above, but it was rather dark beyond it. So here I am again, I grumbled, following Argo through the doors into the battle arena. Excited voices drowned out the faint string music. The wide room was full of different kind of enthusiasm in the gaming room above. It was lowered in the middle like a bowl, and on the far side was a stage covered by a huge golden cage. Buffet tables with bearing finger foods lined the walls on either side of us, and we saw a ticket counter on one corner. Between the sides of the stage and the buffet tables, there were over 50 guests present, but I couldn't make out their faces in the gloom. Instead, I focused on the silhouettes long enough to bring up the player cursors one by one. Ah, there's the ALS, I murmured, just as Asuna whispered, found the DKB. We indicated the locations for each other with our glances. The ALS members were on the right side of the arena, while the DKB took up spots on the buffet on the left side. Both groups had large papers spread out on the table and were deep in excited discussion. I wonder what they're looking at. Those are the odds, I explained. They list the names and the description of the monsters that are going to fight on stage, along with a payout if they win. You can get that for free from the ticket counter. I don't want them, Asuna claimed, fixing me with an uncomfortable, firm glance. Right, of course not. Anyway, hey Argo, where's the quest NPC? I don't see any marks. We're now in the party together, so any ongoing quest NPCs should have a exclamation mark above their head, even if Argo had picked up the quest, but no amount of searching turned up any sight of one. Of course you don't. The quest NPC's somewhere else, Argo said, turning to me. Huh? I squawked. Then why are we here? We're running an errand, obviously. As a general rule, quests in SAO fell into 4 broad categories. There were collection quests that involved gathering materials out in the wilderness, combat quests requiring you to defeat a particular monster, escorting quests where you helped an NPC get from one place to another safely, and errand quests, which came in a great variety of forms. Errands got called fetch quests for good reason, because many of them involved getting some item and bringing it back, or delivering an item to someone else. But if that was what the quest was, there would need to be a quest NPC to receive the item or give it to us here. And since there was no such NPC, is it a search or an investigation? Yep, said Argo as we walked. I groaned in dismay. Search and investigation quests were one of the most troublesome errands. The Curse of Stanchion quest on the 6th floor took us all over the place, and it started with a request to find the golden cube. While not everything that happened in it was scripted, it had lasted all the way to the floor boss battle, praying that this wasn't going to be a similarly epic quest. I asked, do we need to find something that someone lost in here? Nope. Looking for a person? Nope. Argo walked down the stairs that went through the lowered part of the floor, cutting down every suggestion I had. When we reached the bottom, she had led us right into the ring of NPCs huddled around the battle cage that covered the stage. The upper class NPCs lounge on sofas on higher levels that you had to pay or watch from the buffet tables. The ones gathered directly around the battle cage were rougher, lower class men. What you want? They grumbled. Don't push! But Argo ignored them and walked right into the golden cage, then looked at Asuna and me. 10 minutes until the first match. I've got to explain what I want your help with. She beckoned me closer, and I leaned my left ear toward her face. Asuna leaned in with her right ear, putting the two of us face to face at very close distance. But it would be too awkward to change stances now. Fortunately, Asuna didn't seem to mind, so I put on a poker face and listened to Argo's explanation. In a few minutes, 2 monsters are going to fight inside this cage. Yeah? According to my quest client, one of them is cheating somehow. Huh? I said, louder than I needed to. Both girls put a finger to my lips. I turned my internal volume knob a bit to the left and continued. Cheating? These are monsters that are fighting, not humans. Do they even have enough intelligence to cheat? A kobold or a shroomman might, don't you think? Asuna pointed out. I shrugged. Unless things have changed since the beta, there aren't any demi-human monsters in the arena. Probably because it would feel a little too unsavory. They weren't in the daytime arena, Argo agreed, pulling out a piece of folded parchment from her shorts pocket. It was the odds list from the ticket counter. When had she picked that up? Here, it's got the first matchup listed. Asuna and I took the paper and stuck our heads together to read it. Argo pointed to a spot that contained the names Bouncy Slater and Rusty Lycaon, written in Japanese. The odds were 1.64 for the former and 2.39 for the latter. Huh? Don't the odds usually change depending on who the people are betting on and by how much? Asuna wondered suspiciously. That was true, but there was a special trick to this odds table. Just watch the numbers, I whispered as black numerals on the parchment began to move like living animals. The 2 numbers changed to 1.62 and 2.40. Oh, hey, they changed. Get it? I bet if Kismel saw this, she'd say it's some strange human charm. The instant I mentioned Dark Elf Knight's name, Asuna's eyelids lowered with concern. It didn't last long, however. I see, so the numerical odds automatically update on the sheet, she said, meaning they're Are more people who are betting on Bouncing Slater to win with the first match? Not necessarily. Odds are determined solely by the amount of money wagered, so it could just be a few big spenders who tilt the odds in that contestant's favor. I see. Anyway, I assume that the Lycaon has to be a dog-like monster, but what would a Bouncing Slater be? She asked. Argo answered first. A slater is another name for a pill bug, one that bounces in this case. Pill bug? Asuna repeated, making a sour face. Which one is your client suspicious of, Argo? I asked. The pill bug or the Lycaon? The Lycaon. Meaning your client wants you to figure out what the trick is? Correct, the info dealer said. Just then, there was a loud crash of a gong behind us, followed by an energetic announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the crown jewel of Volupta Grand Casino, the Battle Arena! I turned around and spotted a booth on the next level above the floor with the cage, where an NPC in a white shirt and a red bow tie was standing in a spotlight. It was a primitive spotlight using mirrors and large lanterns, of course, but not an electric one. But whether it was actually working on some logical systems or just generic the magic of the virtual world, it was plenty bright. When the crowd applause died down, the NPC continued, speaking. His voice loud enough for everyone in the arena to hear him, despite the lack of a microphone. The first match of our night schedule will be starting shortly. Ticket sales are ending in just 5 minutes, so get those wagers in now, while you have the chance. A number of guests, NPCs of course, rushed toward the ticket counter. The ALS and DKB did not move from the buffet tables because they had already bought theirs. I wonder if they actually bet all 1,000 chips they won during the day, I murmured skeptically. Argo shrugged. Probably did, yeah. If they're serious about turning 1,000 into 100 grand, they gotta bet everything they have on all 5 matches coming up. I glanced down at the odds table again. The odds on the first match had shifted again to 1.61 and 2.41. The subsequent matches had payouts that hovered around 2 or 3 at the highest if you bet everything you had and won all 5 times. It would indeed be possible to reach 100,000 chips starting from 1,000. That was the trap, however. I'd won the first 4 bets in a similar situation during the beta, and was just 1 match away from claiming the top prize at the casino when I sighed, banishing that memory, then smirked at Argo. Now that we know there's cheating going on, we should bet everything on the Lycaon. Better not! If you buy a Monster Battle ticket while the quest is active, you fail it, she said, shaking her head rapidly. The info dealer fixed the two of us with a dead serious look. And I don't think this is the kind of quest where you get a do-over. Still, I'm not positive I can spot the tell on my own. Keyboy, A-chan, I'll need your help. You bet, said Asuna brightly. I added a clumsy, yeah. Within moments, the gong crashed again, and the lights in the hall dimmed. The artificial spotlight hit the golden cage this time. Everyone in the room focused silently on the stage. The rectangular cage was quite large, 12 feet across in the short side and 30 on the long side. 3 sides of the cage were bars, while the far side was the stone wall of the room. Metal bars blocked the roof on the cage too, and there were a partition on the side that separated it into 2 parts. In the beta, the monsters simply popped into existence on either side of the cage, which struck me as lazy programming. This, too, appeared to be another area where the official release had been polished up. Rumbling heavily, the stone wall receded in two places that subsequently began to rise upward. The NPC with the bow tie announced, "And now, starting with the first match of the Battle Arena's night schedule, our first combatant, a killer insect clad in steel armor, the Bounty Slater!" Just as Argo had described, a pillbug came prodding out of the left doorway. Only it was nearly 3 feet long. Its tough-looking shell was bluish-black and shining. I'd fought these enemies a few times in the beta. If you tried to slash their shells and let your strength do the work, it would only succeed at wearing down your weapon. And in opposition, the Red Reaper, whose jaws can crush iron, the Rusty Lycaon! A deep growl emerged from the right doorway. Out of the darkness proceeded a dog-type monster with a dark red pelt and black spots. Lycaons were squatter than wolves, with shorter snouts, but they were hardier and had very powerful jaws. Even without the length of the tail, it was probably larger than the pillbug. Colored cursors appeared above both monsters. They were NPC yellow rather than a shade of red, perhaps to hide the system that displayed an enemy's relative difficulty based on the tint of its color. I focused on the Lycaon. According to the person who gave Argo the quest, it was engaging in some sort of foul play. Both Pillbug and Lycaon were monsters that appeared in the later half of the 7th floor. Between them, it was the Pillbug that had been more trouble in the beta. Lycaons weren't easy by any means, but the danger mainly came from the fact that they appeared in packs of 2 or 3. As long as you could isolate one and deal with it individually, they were a good source of experience. The NPC announcer claimed it could crush iron with its jaws, but that was a bit of an exaggeration. As a matter of fact, the odds were higher for the Lycaon, meaning that the guests in the hall had put down more money overall on the Pillbug. Therefore, if you placed a big counterbid on the Lycaon and had some means of cheating, it would win. You stood to make major cash. The real question was how you could help the Lycaon win the monster battle while all these people were watching. It doesn't seem particularly noteworthy, visually speaking. I was expecting to see metal dentures or claws attached. Don't you think people would notice that? This isn't BattleBots, Asuna said arcily. I was thinking that they might have fed it some kind of stimulant, but I've never seen this monster before, so I wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Can you, Kirito? It doesn't seem like it's exceptionally agitated or anything, and wouldn't a drug like that leave an icon over its HP bar? Whether it's supposed to be a buff or a debuff? Good point, Asuna murmured. The bowtie announcer called out, "Will the killer steel insect crush its prey, or will the Red Reaper crack the shell with its jaw? Let the first match begin!" Whoosh! The gong crashed again, and the fence that separated the two halves of the cage lowered. The pillbug elongated abdominal eyes flashed, as did the red irises of the Lycaon.
"Help me out here, you two!"
Argo whispered as the monsters roared and the crowd cheered. Shah! The pillbug hissed. The Lycaon roared. They charged together, the pillbug opening its jaws and scuttling forward on 7 pairs of legs, while the Lycaon leaped to the right on its third step in an attempt to circle around the enemy. The pillbug could change directions, but much more slowly. The Lycaon got behind it on a diagonal and pressed the attack at once, biting one of the insect's legs. It locked its legs and shook its head violently, snapping the leg off at the base and spilling out bright red damage effects. The pillbug hissed, something that could not be identified as either rage or a scream. Its HP gauge dropped about 7%. Cheers and howls filled the arena. Belatedly, I wondered which one of Lin's and Kabao's groups had bet on. The answer might have been clear from the reactions, but I couldn't take my eyes off that HP bar. The Lycan won the first attack, but that didn't seem to be the effect of cheating. The Lycan clearly was far superior in mobility, so if the Pillbug rushed straight for it, of course, it was going to circle around the back. The beast attacked again and pulled out a second leg, increasing the damage to 15%. The NPC announcer wailed,
"The Red Reaper scores consecutive attacks. I guess that bug's just a bug."
The Lycan reacted as though it understood those words, taking distance and growling. The severed leg in its jaws turned into blue particles that disappeared in the air. There were still 12 legs left. If it removed all of them, the Pillbug wouldn't be able to walk, assuming it was even still alive. If the same thing kept repeating, that would be the result, but I knew from the trouble they caused me in the beta that this Pillbug could do more than slowly rotate. Shh! The Pillbug growled, and it suddenly rolled itself up. Its head, feelers, and legs all vanished inside the shining black carapace. The Lycan glared warily at the new shape of its enemy. A black ball, 16 inches across. 4 of 5 seconds of silence passed, and someone in the audience lost patience and shouted, "Attack it, Pop!" Right on cue, there was a movement, but it was the Pillbug. However, instead of returning to its usual form, it flattened its rounded form, then shot up into the air with an explosive BAM! The Pillbug launched itself upward like a rocket, first colliding with the ceiling of the cage, then reflecting downward with a shower of sparks. Like a game of three-dimensional pinball, it bounced off the cage wall, the floor, then wall again, and slammed in the Lycan's side. The Lycan yelped in pain as it was hurled into the side of the cage. It got to its feet immediately after falling to the ground, but that single blow took out nearly 30% of its health. That high-speed bounce attack was the Pillbug's one means of offense, and it was a doozy. It was also the reason for the name Bouncy Slater. On a flat, open plain, it was easy enough to avoid direct charge. But in the forest, it could bounce off trees, making it a two-dimensional attacker rather than one. Even worse, with the floor and ceiling in a dungeon, it became a three-dimensional attacker. I got beaten the hell up from all directions before I mastered the trick to avoiding them.
And that's the Slater's killer attack technique. Is the deadly Lycan helpless to counteract this one?
Asked the announcer. His voice was drowned out by a deluge of cheers. The Pillbug flattened its body again. Lycan sank back, preparing to avoid the attack. Bam! The Pillbug shot off the ground again, this time reflecting off the stone wall behind it to attack its opponent from the side. The Lycan jumped high to avoid the first angle, but the Pillbug merely bounced off the cage to the floor and back upward towards the still aloft Lycan. The wolf-like creature was blasted against the ceiling and fell to the ground. Its HP was in the yellow zone, under 40%. Are you sure this thing is cheating? I muttered reflexively. Neither Argo nor Asuna replied. Like me, they hadn't spotted anything yet. Cheers of support arose from the hobbled Lycan, but not many. The majority of the onlookers had bet on the Pillbug, it seemed. One more solid bouncing attack would probably kill the Lycan, and given the small dimensions of the cage and many surfaces it offered to bounce off, it seemed impossible to avoid such a three-dimensional high-speed attack. For the third time, the Pillbug squashed itself against the ground. The black orb shot upward at an angle. Wham! It was bounced back and forth from the ceiling to the floor, approaching the wounded Lycan. The battle was over, it seemed to me. But then the Lycan howled ferociously and leaped straight for the Pillbug. A simple body blow couldn't possibly crack that tough shell. It could shatter a shard. The beast was going to get smashed and die for sure. until suddenly the Lycan began rapidly rotate around the median line of its body. It opened its jaws wide and spun at the rate that defied the laws of physics. The Lycan rushed forward like a red drill and slammed into the cannonball pill bug midair. An ear-splitting metallic crash ripped through the air, and a huge spray of sparks issued from the point where they met. Both creatures writhed and struggled aloft until 1 HP bar began to drop very rapidly. They were so close together that it was difficult to identify which one it was. Even I found myself holding my breath, and I didn't have any money on the match. Crash! A huge amount of blue sparks burst outward. The fury red Lycan flew through the cloud and landed on the other side of the cage. Several seconds of silence was broken by the frantic smashing of the gong. Angry roars, jeers, and cheers exploded from the audience, rattling the arena with their ferocity.
Oh my goodness! What a huge comeback! The winner is the Red Reaper, Rusty Lycan!
Screamed the bowtie. It was loud enough that I barely heard Argo mutter,
Hang on. Do rusty Lycans have a special attack like that?
I never saw it during the beta, I told her, but plenty monsters have received new attack patterns since then. Maybe this is one of them.
In that case, it's a good thing we saw it here. Even you'd have trouble perfectly deflecting an attack like that on your first try, Master Black.
I was tempted to be outraged, but she was right, of course. A canine type monster performing a high-speed spinning attack was simply beyond the bounds of imagination. Even if I managed to defend, the force of it would snap my sword in two. The betters couldn't have anticipated it either. The more unsavory NPCs in the standing area swore loudly and furiously, while exclamations of disappointment could be heard from the seats behind us. The gong crashed again, and the gateway in the stone wall opened once more, but only the right side this time. The victorious Lycan vanished into the darkness, limping slightly, as the bow tie announcer declared,
That's the end of our first match. A round of applause for our winner, Rusty Lycan!
The audience clapped for the winner, but given that more of them had bet on the loser, there wasn't much enthusiasm behind it. That didn't bother the announcer, who continued energetically,
Thank you. Our second match will begin in 10 minutes at 9:20. There are still tickets available for purchase, so if you want to grow your winnings or make up what you lost, step right up to the counter, folks.
The spotlight on the announcer's stand faded, and the room got a bit brighter. In the relaxed atmosphere that followed, the people milling around trickled towards the exit or the buffet bars. That made me wonder how the results affected our fellow players. I stared at the table where the DKB had been seated. Lynn, Shivada, and Hafner were raising narrow-fluted glasses. Apparently, they'd bet on the Lycan and multiplied their winnings by 2.41. Then I turned to look at the ALS on the other side of the room. I very nearly murmured, "No way," when I saw them. Cabal group was raising mugs of ale and having a toast with huge smiles on every face. They certainly didn't seem to be drinking to the morn of a loss. I turned to the two girls, who were still examining the combat cage, and said, "Seems like Lynn and Kiba both won."
Ugh, no way,
muttered Argo. Great minds think alike.
I figured that one of the two would have lost it all there. That means they both got 2,400 chips. What now? What if they both make 100,000 and they both get that big shiny sword, assuming there's two of them to share?
We won't do a thing. If it speeds up our pace through the game, that's a good thing. I gave the honor student response, but of course I couldn't deny that I was just the teensiest bit, maybe half a teaspoon, jealous of the idea. I might have been a prisoner of SAO, but I was also undeniably an online gamer. Yofel the Knight, the man who laid the foundation for today's frontline group, went through Argo in a scheme to buy my anneal blade from me and made a reckless charge against the boss on the first floor in an attempt to win the last attack bonus. Now that the other players had caught up to us in terms of level and gear, I understood his motivations. Or maybe that was presumptuous of me to say. After all, Yofel had wanted to strength in order to save the prisoners of Einkrad, while at the end of the day, I only had interest in my own power. I was broken out of this rare instance of self-reflection by Asuna, who turned away from the cage to ask, "So the special attack the Lycan used wasn't cheating?" To my surprise, she hadn't employed her usual psychic ability to sense my negative thoughts. Yeah, I said quickly. If that was cheating, then the Pillbug's bouncing attack would be too. True. Sorry, Argo. I'm afraid I don't have any idea of what sort of cheating the Lycan may have been doing, Asuna said. Argo shook her head.
Nah, you don't need to apologize. I didn't have a clue either. You notice anything, Key Boy?
With the attention on me, all I could do was raise my palms. No idea. When the Lycan got hit by the Pillbug's reflecting attack and smashed into the cage, I thought it was dead. Had the quest log not been updated at all?
Let's see.
Argo leaned over and opened her window, then looked up and shook her head again.
Nope, no difference. It still says, figure out the imposter's actions used on the Lycan in the first match of the Battle Arena's night schedule.
And no hints, huh? We haven't failed the quest yet either? I glanced at the spot where the Lycan struck the golden cage. It couldn't have been pure gold, I assumed. Despite the impact, the vertical bars weren't bent or dented at least. I guess they would have to be just as indestructible as the building itself. Otherwise, there was a chance that a larger, more powerful monster might smash through and endanger the audience. Even if such an event happened, we were within the anti-criminal code zone, so players couldn't lose HP. But what about NPCs? How were they bringing these monsters into town to have them fight anyway? There was no end to the questions I could come up with. My mind worked relentlessly as my eyes fixed the golden cage. I noticed something. My brows lowered. A number of the shining, polished bars were stained with the reddish something, right at the spot where the Lycan hit the cage. Well, if you hit a hard surface with that much force, some blood is to be expected, I thought. But there was no bloodshed in SAO at all. I'd never even seen bloodstains left behind after any battles in the game. There was the blood handprint left on the golden cube from the Curse of Statuen quest, where Silent had beaten his master Pythagoras to death. But that was just part of the quest story. Oh, I murmured again and looked down at myself. I'd removed my armor, so I was wearing a black shirt and pants, and my short sword. There was nothing in my pockets. Do either of you have a handkerchief or something else that you don't mind discarding, preferably a white one? I asked Asuna and Argo, who were reading the latter quest log on party visible mode. Argo merely rolled her eyes, but Asuna said exasperatedly, "You should have one of your own, Kirito." Well, I normally keep one in my belt pouch, but it's not white. Will this do? She said, pulling a perfectly white handkerchief from the large front pocket of her dress. I probably won't be able to give it back. Is that all right? It's fine. I can just make more with the tailoring skill. I didn't even wait for the end of the sentence before I snatched it away and rushed 6 feet to the left, with a quick glance around to make sure neither Cabal, Lind, nor any NPCs were watching. I reached up with the handkerchief and rubbed firmly at the stain on the bars of the cage. Once I'd gotten enough, I stepped away and stared at the cloth. The red color looked too vivid to be dried blood to me, but I couldn't be absolutely positive, because this was a virtual world and all.
Is that the Lycan's blood, Key Boy?
If you wanted to rub the cage, you could have asked for a rag. Undeterred by the skeptical comments from the women, I lifted the red stain to my nose and sniffed. There was none of the particular iron stink of blood. Instead, it had a very faintly sweet, perhaps floral scent. I suspected it was not the actual smell of the Lycian's blood, but rather it was... This isn't blood, I murmured, drawing looks from Argo and Asana.
If it isn't blood, then what is it?
Probably some kind of dye.
Dye? Why would it be?
Argo paused, then looked to the left, not behind me, but to a message on the left side of her line of sight.
Quest log just updated.
Huh? What does it say? Asked Asana, leaning forward. Argo opened her quest window again and pointed. I sidled around and looked over Asana's shoulder. The updated quest log said, "You have discovered the illegitimate tactic used on the Lycian. Report back to the quest giver." Argo grinned, having figured out the trick, and held out her fist. I gave her knuckles, but Asana still looked confused. So the dye was evidence of cheating? Why would that... Oh! She figured it out too, before I needed to explain it to her, but we didn't want to talk about it out loud to be overheard. I held a shushing finger to my lips and whispered to Argo, "Is the quest giver nearby?"
In a hotel on the 3rd floor.
Really? The VIP area? Do you have a pass?
The quest giver gave me one on the 1-day pass kind of thing. Don't worry, I can get friends through, I think.
The last comment left me a little worried, but we were already along for the ride. It was a shame I wouldn't get to watch the second match, but we weren't placing bets anyway. Okay, let's go.
Sure thing. Just be on your best behavior, keyboy, she said,
only to me, and then turned to leave. As we rushed after her, I glanced over and saw Asana biting her lip, trying desperately not to laugh.